Nau mai hara mai ki Kaupapa on the couch. He Māoritanga te kaupapa o te rānei. There's an election in September. Are you enrolled to vote? Here in Aotearoa, if you have Māori heritage, you can choose to either be on the general electoral roll or the Māori electoral roll. Everybody has the same party vote, but we vote for different MPs in different electorates. The Māori electorates are
Te Tai Tokerau, Tāmaki Makaurau, Hauraki Waikato, Waiariki, Te Tai Hauauru, Ikaroa Rāwhiti and Te Tai Tonga.
The general electorates are all of those. Now, here's where it gets confusing, because there are 7 Māori MPs, but there are also MPs who are Māori, but they're not Māori MPs. Do you know what I mean? Any of the political parties can put forth candidates for the Māori electoral seats, although currently only Labour, the Greens, the Mana Movement and the Māori Party have candidates standing. By the way, there are other countries with dedicated electoral seats for ethnic and indigenous groups. Lebanon, Singapore, Guam, Puerto Rico, India, and the Sami people in Scandinavia have their own separate parliament. So why do we have Māori seats? The first Māori seats were set up in 1867 under the Māori Representation Act. There were 4 seats in total, southern, northern, eastern and western, so original, although there should have been like 16 per capita, you know what I mean? Some people think that the government was sincerely trying to give Māori serious political representation, as was their right under the Treaty of Waitangi. Some think that it was just a gesture to reward the loyalists and silence the haters. By the way, you know when we talk about tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhake, self-determination and the right to govern ourselves according to our own customs and beliefs. The New Zealand Constitution Act, passed by the British Parliament, basically said we could do that. It asked that certain districts were set aside where Māori law and customs were maintained. Basically, the Crown granted Māori sovereignty back in 1852, but the New Zealand government never implemented it. Hard eye roll, bro. Anyway, back in the olden days, it was all about getting land. The Crown were like, come on, give it. And Māori were like, bro, I'm living here. And the Crown is like, go on. And Māori were like, there's enough room for us all to share. And the Crown is like, nah, I was thinking more like you give us all of it, and also you can't speak your language anymore. Stink, bro. So one of the ways that Māori land was snapped up was through the Crown forcing iwi to take their land out of communal title and put it into individual title. So instead of being owned by everyone in the tribe, it could only be owned by up to 10 people. As times got harder and harder for Māori, it made it easier for people to come along and buy up that land really cheap. The Māori seats were meant to be temporary while that was going on, and then supposedly they'd go on the common roll after that. But the whole process of stealing people's land legally took longer than they thought. So Parliament voted to keep the Māori seats for another 5 years. And then after that, they voted to keep them indefinitely. Whether you could vote in the European or the Māori electorate depended on something called blood quantum. Seriously, blood quantum? Sounds like a really bad movie. That meant that any full-blooded Māori had to be on the Māori roll. Anyone with less than 50% Māori blood had to be on the European roll, and those of equal blood, or half-caste, had their choice of which role they wanted to be on. It stayed like this until 1975. BTW, Māori don't distinguish these things by percentages. If you can trace your whakapapa back to one Māori ancestor, you're one of us, and you can't get out of doing the dishes. Only 40% of eligible voters voted on the Māori roll in 1976, so they figured instead of abolishing the seats, Māori would just abandon them altogether. In 1986, there was a royal commission that proposed we adopt the MMP electoral system, and it also reckoned we should get rid of the Māori electorates because under MMP, people would have to pay more attention to Māori concerns anyway. Parliament drafted a bill, it was supported by National and Labour, but Māori were like, nah. So the seats stayed. People have a lot of whakaaro about whether or not we should keep the Māori seats. Nationalists said they'll abolish the Māori seats once all historical treaty claims have been resolved. New Zealand First want to have a binding referendum after this election, and Labour wants to entrench the seats forever. What do you think? Comment down below. Ka kite a te rā marama. We'll see you next month for another episode of Kaupapa on the Couch.